we're back again with a good friend of mine, Jeremy Bourdon. How are you going?
Yeah, great. Great to be back.
Great to have you back. Welcome back to the Upside Down People podcast.
Round two.
Round two. What did you feel of round one?
I just like catching up with you.
Yeah.
So I'm just happy to have a chat. Yeah, it was a great time. Had fun.
Yeah. What was the highlight for you, Jeremy?
Putting me on the pressure. I think it's all your wisdom that I got from the session.
Really?
You know?
Oh, wow. That was quite the opposite what people were feeding back to me. They were saying they loved your engagement and the depth of knowledge that you have.
I feel like if I said my depth of knowledge, that wouldn't be a very humble answer. That was my favorite part of.
Really?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it be humble?
If I said my favorite part was all of the knowledge that I bring to the podcast.
You could just be very confident and assured.
I usually am pretty confident, but yes, my humility wouldn't let me answer that way.
Yeah.
No, honestly, I do love to hear people's perspectives on things, and I like to understand where they're coming from, what they're thinking about. I've been really learning how to process things for myself.
Okay.
And in my relationship with my wife, just talking about family stuff and how we grew up and things like that. So
awesome.
Anytime I can hear from someone else and their experiences, to better understand them, it's a great time of conversation.
I love that you brought that up because I think that's something really key is relationships and how we engage with our partners, our wives, our spouses. And then even it goes into friendships and things like that. So you mentioned you've been doing lots of thinking and processing. What does that mean for you in relation to your relationship?
Well, some people may have not heard the last kind of episode that I was on, but married to Brooke. We've been married for 7 years. I'm originally from the U.S. She's an Australian, so we have that intercultural thing, but
you wouldn't think it's a big deal, right? Two Western cultures coming together, but it's quite significant.
No, and there's little things of how we grew up and what we valued, and it's oh, remember this thing from our childhood? And she's like, no, that wasn't a part of my childhood, So there are little differences.
Yeah.
And we have 2 kids. Boaz is 4 and Francis is 1.5.
Awesome.
So just we've become our own family, right?
Yeah.
You get into this relationship, and I think you learn right away, anyone that's got married, you learn man, I'm really selfish. It's probably, I don't know, maybe it's just me.
No, I think it's everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone that enters into, marriage, I would say.
Yeah. You just learn right after the honeymoon, it's wow, man, I really like things certain ways, or I like my comforts or how I want to do things.
Yeah.
And that's where the communication, I think, starts.
Okay.
In the relationship, you've gone through all this premarital stuff and tried to figure out each other to the point that you want to get married, and then you're living together, and it's oh shoot, there's things that we haven't talked about, just practically how she sees dirt compared to how I see dirt,
right. Or even cleanliness, expectations of when dishes should get done, or how long to leave them, those nuances.
100%. Brooke is let's get it all done and then we can rest. And I'm let's rest. And then when I'm ready, I'll do the things. So even little things like that, you just have to communicate through and understand the other person and what they're going through. I don't know. Have you found that similar?
100%. I think, I think... So I've got sort of 2 simultaneous thoughts. The one is I agree with what you're saying is you come from 2 different ways of doing life.
Yeah.
And then you put that together. It's like being in a share house with some friends.
Yeah.
But then to the next level, because it's like you're not just trying to be tolerant of the other person, but you're trying to actually do life and build a life together.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those nuances like quickly give you the choice of either like I can see my selfish desires coming up. Because I think like the example you gave with the dishes is like I'm totally the same. It's like, oh, let's leave this and see how like do it a bit later. And then I find that actually that is really disruptive because things come up later anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then my other thought was, which I completely just forgot, obviously not an important one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting dynamic of like even the way that you've been brought up, not good or bad, but just things that your family may have not valued and that the other family valued.
Right.
So like one of the big things for us, me growing up was my parents let me have any opportunity I wanted.
Okay.
So if I wanted to play sports, I played 7 sports in high school.
Nice.
So I just was like out and did stuff. So the dinner table was not that important to us.
Right.
Like I eat really fast because that was the only way you could get seconds.
You had brothers as well, right? So
I have 2 brothers and a sister. So
that plays into it as well.
Yeah. and it was just like dinner time was just a vehicle to like nourish yourself so that you can go and do the next thing.
Yeah.
Where Brooke, it's really important to like sit down and debrief and have the conversation. And I think it's beautiful and I love it. And I love that that's a part of ours. But then I'm like looking back at my childhood going, oh, we didn't do that. Like, would that have changed our family dynamic?
Yeah.
Would we be closer, you know, me and my siblings if we did that, you know? And it's not good or bad.
Right.
But the decisions that were made for you, like through your parents or through the way you grew up, do have an effect on your life or how you view things. And they might go, oh, I view things this way because this is the way it was done for me and I want to keep that the same. Or it's like, oh, we did that and I didn't like that actually, and I want to change that now for my kids and my family.
Right. So what's some things then in terms of, I love that family of origin stuff because that plays a huge part in two people coming together.
Yeah.
And at first glance, I'd say my wife Haley and my family like seem similar, but then we're very different in the way we approach things.
Yeah.
Like being the way we've been brought up. But then also you add in different personalities as well. So I have a very different personality to my wife. And how do you find, like, what have you found helpful in that process?
So I think anytime you can communicate well, like, I think that's a skill in itself. For me, something that I think is really important, and I would encourage anyone, I think it's important for everyone, but I also think understanding the way you show up in the world is really important.
Right. What do you mean by that?
So for me, I have a certain way of being about myself.
Okay.
And people see me in a certain way. And it's good for me to understand, oh, wow, that thing I do is kind of annoying to some people. Or, you know, to someone like my wife, who is maybe a bit more of a perfectionist, she just wants me to do this thing. I don't need to tell her the big story of why all this stuff happened. She just wants to know what the result was, kind of thing. So I think that's really important. And I'm not saying, it doesn't mean you can't talk about anything with your spouse. But I think understanding the way you show up in the world and the way that other person shows up is kind of important. And that comes down to the family origin stuff too.
Yeah. So what's a way then you can serve your wife in that?
That's a great question. So I think if I go back to the dishes thing,
Yeah.
I think understanding her way of wanting things done is me serving her, if I do it in that way.
Right.
It's unnatural to me to just be like, all right, we've done this. Kids are down. Now I'm going straight to dishes. I'm going to get the dishes done so we can hang out for 20 minutes before, it's bedtime. Sometimes it feels that short. But I find that's serving, my wife. Like there is a lot around like cleanliness of the home. That's like a high value to my wife too, so not going, oh, this job's just for you to clean the house, because it's your standards, but going, oh no, this is something that I need to make important to me too, like, because it's important to you.
Yeah.
Rather than going, I'm doing the dishes early because I love you. Yes, I am, but it's almost encompassing each other's stuff, or way of being, or way that we want things done, to have a better connection. If that does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think like it's always like I can know and understand obviously that it's difficult in practice. So it's like in theory, like being able to serve your partner in a way that's like God honoring and like lifts their burden and what they find value in, and like entering into that space. But then I don't know, for myself, I found, and again, it comes back to that selfishness thing, right? So it's like I found myself doing the dishes or doing things the way my wife likes them. But then there's something inside me saying like, this doesn't feel right. Like you need recognition, you need appreciation. So when there's not that, then I quickly see like, oh, am I doing this out of service or am I doing this to fulfill my pride?
I think we always have competing ideas in our minds, like I think that always happens, and it's like, what are you going to let win kind of in your mind? So I don't think there's anything wrong in that.
Yeah.
But I guess it is that thing is if you are searching for the, oh, well done, Caleb. Thanks for doing the dishes, then it's like, is that right? I think it's hard not to.
It's hard. Yeah. I mean, it a bit of encouragement goes a long way.
100%.
But then there's also that I think it's like where you can look at it with the gospel lens is like pure, untainted, unselfish motives. You don't need the recognition. You're just laying your life down, what you want to do, the way you want it to be done, the recognition you want to receive from it. And you're just saying, okay, well, what's going to help my wife flourish? What's going to help her succeed? What's going to clear her mind or set her up for a win? And that's I suppose, a lifelong journey of discovering how that
I would
works.
say my wife is way better at that than I am. She's
awesome.
She's probably more the one that probably sacrifices or does things the way that I would like it, with no recognition and no need for thank yous or anything like that. She's like, she's incredible. So
that's precious. So jumping to communication, you've mentioned a few times.
Yeah,
that's a very big part of relationships. What would you say your communication style is?
You always get me with these styles, and we exclusively just text each other.
Do the dishes, please.
Yeah. It depends.
Hey, Brooke, I am doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Smiley face.
If it's a bad emoji, I know I'm in trouble. I don't know what you necessarily mean by style.
Like how do you guys? So communication is important. I think it's like a lot of conflict, they say, boils down to how, like, communication, how you deal with it, and it's the unspoken expectations. So I think I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that. It's just that's what, like, are you open at communicating? Do you over communicate? Do you express what's on your mind? Do you allow for grace when Brooke shares something with you that pinches a nerve, or like what does communication look like for you?
Yeah, so we probably have a real level of open communication, where we probably wonder more and ask wondering or noticing questions.
Cool.
So, hey, I noticed this is going on. Is that real? Is that what's going on for you right now? Or am I just reading into it? You know,
That's awesome.
There's some of that.
I think that's a really helpful one, because you're not assuming that you know why the other's done something or doing something. It's sort of just saying like, hey, this is the reality I'm perceiving. Can you help me see if that's true or not?
And it can be as simple as, you know, like I hurt my wrist recently, fractured my hand, you know? So then I stopped working out because my hand was messed up. But then when it started to get better, I probably didn't jump in as much as I did.
Right.
So, like, it could be as simple as Brooke going, hey, I'm not saying you're gaining weight or anything like that, but I have noticed, you know, like, you're waking me up when you get up at night. Yeah. You're not exercising as much as you used to. What's going on there? You know, is something happening? And it's like, oh, I probably have just gone into a weird lazy cycle, you know, kind of thing. So it can be as simple as that. There's also like an awareness sometimes where we just need to say, I'm having a hard day. This is going on in my mind. I'm feeling anxious, you know? And that probably allows us to have more grace for each other.
Right.
When some of that stuff happens.
Yeah. And is that easy to communicate that to?
It is now.
Yeah. I would say, like, for me, that's been so difficult, communicating where I'm at. Like, hey, I need space. I need... like, Haley is so kind to me in like reiterating, like, hey, I want to know when, like, you've had a difficult day. Just let me know. And for some reason, like, that's been the journey for myself to be able to be like, hey, I need this time. I need to go for a run, or I need to go for a surf. Because in a really, like, prideful way or self-righteous way, it's like I'm trying to think of what's going to be the best for her.
Yeah.
But then it ends up in an argument or something like that, because I close off, I don't say anything, and then it's like I disconnect from or disengage from like family life or around the dinner. Like we really value like the dinner time. So it's like disconnect from there, and it's like, oh, what's happening? Like nothing. But actually really deep down inside, it's just like, oh, I just need a moment.
So when you have been vulnerable, what's been the response in those situations?
Yeah, just like love, kindness, and grace. There hasn't been a response that would make me fearful of opening up or sharing. So that's why it's been like, I've been married for coming on to 6 years. So in the first couple of years, it was really difficult because I had a fear that if I was like, I need space, that's showing a weakness. Yeah. Like I should be able to give my all, give my everything all the time. Yeah. And that's still a part, is like I still feel like I need to show up 100%. And I know like, man, I'm like at 30%. So my 30% is horrible. Like no one wants that. And that's what I'm giving to my wife, thinking like, oh, it's like cram study for a test. I can pass this test, but really don't. Where all she needs is, hey, I'm at 30%. Can I just have 10 minutes, 15 minutes? And she's said multiple times, like, that's just let me know where you're at. And then like that's perfect.
It's so funny that it's hard for us sometimes, especially when like the response we get when we do it is like
undeserving.
Yeah. So much, like there's so much grace and love. Even tonight, like today, Brooke's an introvert, right? And I'm an extreme extrovert. My kids are all up in my face and I love it.
Yeah.
But I've probably taught them to do that too. So like they're all over Brooke because she's mom. And she's like, okay, I just don't want to be touched for a little bit, which I don't fully understand because I'm not that person.
Right. Love the physical touch.
Love physical touch. Loved, to wrestle and hug the kids, and the kids are climbing over me and stuff. And it's great. But even tonight she was like, I just need 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I just need to, she's a doer. She was like, today she even said, she's like, when friends ask me what I do in my free time, it's dishes, and she's like, and then they're like, no, but when you have free time, she's like, well, it's more dishes, and she was joking, but there's some truth in that she is always serving us in the household. So she was like, I want 5 minutes. So Boaz is really into coloring right now. Set him up with coloring. Took Francis for a walk.
Awesome.
Like, it was great. Everyone had their space and it was fine. But just being able to do those like little check-ins is so important.
Yeah.
And if you can get that right and you can get those communications, and even in those, I'm at 30% right now. I just need some time.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that stops the big blow-ups.
Yeah, just being honest with where you're at, and what you need. And that is, I suppose, why it's so hard is it is vulnerable, because essentially, like, you're at dinner time. Haley has every right to be like, hey, I really need you to show up right now. So it's vulnerable because it's just like, I could get rejected. And if you have a fear of rejection, then it's going to play into that. But sort of the other side of that is much worse. So yeah.
I do have one. I have one story of rejection.
All right, share it.
Where I'm sure Brooke's probably not listening to this, but she would probably be fine to hear it. Where I was really struggling with one of the jobs I took, and I was struggling with me being in the male and trying to, you got to be the breadwinner and you got to make money and all this stuff. And I'm working this full-time job that I hate, where I'm stuck behind a desk. And anyone that knows me knows, like, I can't be confined.
Yeah.
So, like, I worked with all females and me. And, like, I just, like, would go get them coffees. And I would just, like, I was like, I'm just going to love these females like I love my wife. Like, that's going to be my way of, like, making this space okay.
Yeah.
But I only lasted probably like 3 or 4 months, and I had nothing next.
Right.
But I like couldn't stay in it.
Yeah.
And I finally like worked up the courage to Brooke and be like, I really hate life right now. Like, I hate this job. And she probably answered in the worst way possible, which was, sometimes you just need to suck it up.
Right.
And that comes from her, like, culture, and there's some family dynamics in that stuff too. And the season we were in, I just came off of not working with my visa and stuff like that. So it wasn't like unwarranted. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But like in that, I just wanted her to say, "No, just quit. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You'll find something else." Like that's what I wanted.
Right.
And I came into this space and I was kind of crushed. And one of the things I've learned over the years is I don't let everyone have the same voice in my life. Like, I can preach, and if someone randomly comes up and it's like, "Oh, that was terrible," I'm like, "Okay, who are you?" Like,
right.
It doesn't hold weight anymore. It used to. I'm a people pleaser, so it used to really crush me. But I find when someone I do trust doesn't respond in the way that I want, that's where the hurt comes from.
Right.
So in that moment, it wasn't the best, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't know where to go anymore, and that led to deeper conversation, and we figured it out, and we worked it out, and it was all good. But like in the moment, I was like, oh,
yeah,
I was kind of crushed because I
think that's a great example in terms of like the truth about relationships is you can't love without being hurt, because if someone's listening to this and they're in a relationship and they're being like, I've never been hurt by like my spouse or by my boyfriend or girlfriend or even a friend, there's a good question to ask, well, do you really love them or do they really love you? Because you're different people, so you're going to do something or respond in a different way, and if you're being vulnerable, that's going to expose that opportunity to be hurt. But how did you journey? So forgiveness is a huge central part of any relationship and any healthy marriage, I'd say. So how did you journey of forgiveness?
This is where I'm going to sound probably holier than I should. But man, forgiveness isn't really that hard for me.
Awesome.
Just in the sense of like, when I think of the gospel, I'm like, man, like I suck. Like I mess up constantly, you know, and like I need all the forgiveness. And if Jesus can save me and forgive me of my wrongdoings and die on a cross for me, like,
yeah,
my wife didn't respond the way that I needed. Like, how am I gonna, you know, like hold something like that over her? You know, like
that's beautiful.
So I don't know. There's probably not too many people that, I've really struggled to forgive on things.
Yeah.
I probably haven't had anything that's like crazy hard, you know, to forgive people on either.
That's a gift to, and it's awesome because to keep a short record of wrongdoing against you is probably like, that's something that you learn from Jesus.
Yeah, like it has to be from him. Because it's
most of us have to learn it from Jesus.
Yeah,
You've just been blessed with the gift.
It's not a Jeremy trait, I can tell you that.
But that's awesome because it's like it is such an important part. And I heard it in a recent conversation that I had with the lady, Dr. Jennifer Thomas. She wrote the book, The 5 Apology Languages, and she is saying this. I think the statement that stuck with me was forgiveness. When you forgive someone or when you ask someone for forgiveness, essentially what you're asking them is, can you carry this wrongdoing that I've done against you and not hold it against me?
Yeah.
So it's not like you'll never forget that.
Yeah.
But you every time that thought comes up, you'll just choose to relinquish it and not hold it against. And it's just like, that's huge because, I mean, for me anyway, that's huge because when I'm asking Haley for forgiveness, even though it's something I want so badly, I need to be able to recognize, well, what I'm asking for her to do is, can you carry this burden for however long it takes? And I'm going to live in the freedom of that.
Yeah.
So I have all the freedom and she's now carrying the weight. And that's I think what I'm hearing you say is like, you look to Jesus and you say, well, he's bearing all my sin, bearing all my burdens, my weight, and giving me the freedom to walk in the way I do. Why can't I just do that with other people?
Yeah. 100%. And I'm probably worse on the inverse of that. I've probably harmed some people that I don't even understand, that are holding on to things, you know, that I probably do need to ask for forgiveness of, and I haven't, you know, like I'm probably not as aware of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I don't want to portray myself as like, oh, I've got this all figured out, this forgiveness thing, because I definitely don't. And there's probably, they might even come across this podcast and be like, write in what I did wrong to them.
Well, if they do, then I'm sure it sounds like you'd actually open that criticism or that feedback openly to be able to reconcile.
Yeah, I hope so. Like, I don't want to hold on to things,
Yeah.
Because that just creates bitterness and resentment, and ultimately we're called to love people. So I just want to love people well. And I do make mistakes that make that hard for some people, or maybe my personality doesn't gel so well with certain people that it makes it hard for them. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's that's a very wise insight into yourself.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think of it, what you were saying about if you've never been hurt, like Martin Luther used to talk about cheap grace.
Right.
Where it's like, if there's no wrongdoing in the world, and then Jesus died for the world, like, that's a cheap grace, like, it's what is he dying for kind of thing. And I think that is the same in kind of relationships, like, if there's never kind of that friction or the challenges, it's so simple to love someone if they just agree with everything that you say and do.
And is it really love then?
Yeah.
Or is it, and that's that whole, like, the thing with free will as well, right? It's like, well, is it really love if they just doing everything the way you want it to be done and their heart's not there?
Yeah. I was thinking about this even on the drive today. I didn't know that we were necessarily talking about relationships, but I'm just like thinking about how much your relationship and your love for someone is such a choice too. And it's like, I'm thinking of couples that I just had talked to someone who was telling me that they have been married since 21 and they have, their child's about to turn 17 and stuff, their oldest and all this stuff. And I'm like, how crazy is it that a decision you made when you were 21 has now played out for the last 17 years, kind of thing. I'm like, how did you have the sense of mind to pick someone, like, and then stick with it? And what I can say is, one, you've gotten really lucky and or two, it's a choice that you make and that you constantly make. I tell couples this all the time, or people getting into relationships. I'm like, marry someone that's going in the same direction as you. It doesn't need to be perfect, but they need to be going in the same direction as you, because who I was 7 years ago when I married my wife is not who I am today.
Right.
And who she was 7 years ago is not. Ultimately, people can deviate from the path that they were both going,
Right.
and that can lead to friction and breakdown in relationships. But I'm like, if you're going the same direction, if you're walking the same path, ultimately you'll be making the choices to love each other through that process.
Yeah, I like that. I've sort of, I think of that as like same direction as you both got your eyes fixated on Jesus and you're
100%.
both walking towards him. Me and my wife have always sort of had the conversation and left room in our relationship for change to occur.
Yeah.
Because it's a hard thing, right? Like the person you marry 5 years ago, they're a different person. And most people don't like change, and you hold that against people. But it's having like holding each other in open hands and saying, okay, well, my trust is that your eyes are fixed on Jesus. I'm going to be praying for you and your relationship. And I'm hoping sincerely that he changes your heart, because then he'll change your attitude, he'll change your behavior. and you're going to look like a different. You should look like a different person. And I think we've always tried to hold that space in our relationship. Is like, okay, well, let's not hold things against each other, how we once responded or how we once behaved. And let's look at each other with kind eyes and see, like, okay, with like eager anticipation, I wonder what Jesus is doing in your life. I wonder how he's shaping you, and let's get on board with that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that love grows too, you know?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Which people don't necessarily talk about heaps, but it's like, you know, there was a lot of that infatuation when we first got married, you know, and which is beautiful, and that can sustain, and you think you're so in love, but then it's like when you watch your wife like birth a child, and you're like, holy cow, like I love this person even more. They've just put their body through, you know, 9-10 months of intense grueling, you know, like up and downs to get to this point. And then when you go through like hard times in your life, even, you know, that silly story I told about my job, but someone that can love me through that when I'm like not probably the most fun to be around, you know, it's like
it's that choice.
It's that choice that continues. So even though we're different, it's like, man, I love her more now than what I have in the past.
Yeah.
But it's different now than what it was too.
Awesome.
And that's because we have changed and we are growing, and we're growing in our walk and in our faith and how we look at the world. And so
I love marriage for that reason. Like, marriage is very difficult, and we could have a whole nother conversation on the challenges. And we've sort of highlighted a few, but like, it's one of the most beautiful gifts. Like, I'm so grateful to be able to participate in, because it's like you're making a choice, and that choice sometimes is very hard, but the reward is so beautiful. It's like, man, I am more in love with this person despite difficulties, despite circumstances. And that's like, you can only, so I can only look at God and be like, this is only because of you. Like, this is the way you would love us.
And I think that's why he uses the example of the church being the bride, because it is that, you know, once you understand it, you know, kind of thing. Like, it's the same thing about God as the Father. Like, I understood that as a child, but then when you have a kid, you're like, oh, okay, this completely changes you know, like how I'm thinking about this.
Yeah.
So to understand, like, the church is his bride, that's how much he loves, you know, like, we could go so far down this topic.
We could. We'll probably have to wrap it up. It's been a really cool conversation.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it has been great. And yeah, let's do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, anytime you want me back, happy to come back, as long as people keep listening.
Same shirt, same smile. We'll be back.
Yeah, same everything.
Awesome.